Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Wisdom to Wealth. With us today is a great guest. His name is Timothy Dick. Tim has invested in multiple companies, even started and co-founded companies, three of which were sold to other companies, and three of which were actually on the Inc. 5000 list. Tim has worked in areas such as SaaS, marketing technology, other business technology areas. He's an active angel investor. He consults with companies, even in niches that you might not believe a typical angel investor invests in. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. He's a very unique upbringing. He was raised actually in West Virginia, son of a coal miner. By the way, one of my favorite movies is October Sky. If you've never seen it, you should watch that. And he's a first generation entrepreneur, and he's very passionate about small business, being resourceful, marketing, personal development, and coming up with creative solutions to the challenges that we're facing, which I think is important now more than ever in us dealing with government policy related to COVID. So with all of that, Tim, welcome to the show. Great to have you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, Tim, I'd like to go to that a little bit. I'd love to hear more about your background growing up in West Virginia and like how that gave you a unique perspective. And then maybe we could go into talking about how do we apply our creative perspective, because we each have our own life journey to dealing with the unprecedented challenges we're dealing with right now. So yeah, tell us a bit more about your background. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, sure. So, I was born and raised in rural West Virginia, in a very small town. Town was called Richwood because it was historically rich in wood. And over time, that became a smaller part of the economy there. There was less there. And so, it was a small town that had, lost a lot over the years, and just kind of one of those typical towns that, a lot of businesses are leaving, people are moving. And, even when I was growing up, that was already occurring. And so, my dad was a coal miner. For generations, that had been one of the primary jobs there. You pretty much, most of the jobs were centered in timber, lumber, wood, or coal mining. And, so I, from a pretty young age, I mean, I always felt kind of different, and I just had like this different view about, a lot of things, in terms of like, so being no one in my family had really been entrepreneurial, but growing up, I was always, even from a young age, like thinking about things like I always wanted to play the games where, it was like operating a business, like the store where you sold things, or even as like a very young, where it wasn't actually like a lemonade stand or something. It was just like, I remember doing that. Or I did the radio station where people would call in with their commercials, and, it was all this stuff. And, but everyone around me, including my parents, and I have a really good relationship with my parents now, but back then it was a little hard because they wanted to protect me. And, whatever I would say because I was told that, even from, like the age of 5, I would always see something on TV and say, I'm moving to California or New York. And they would just kind of be like, well, that's probably not going to happen. That's not something that's, usually happens in our family. Like, and, and they were coming from a place of love and protection, but ultimately, it was a place, they were ultimately coming from a place where they didn't think that something like that was possible because they had not been exposed to it themselves. And, very few people in my family had, extended family had ever, even gone to college. So it was just this far-fetched thing. And, whenever I was really young, I kind of rotated. I looked through I visited my parents recently and we were going through like this journal from when I was young. And, I started out, wanting to be a police officer when I was really young. And then that evolved to lawyer. And then it, evolved to businessman. And, I think like I, I really, the turning point was really whenever I got on the internet, and I started seeing, the possibilities that were out there. And I just thought, why not me? And it was something that I just started whenever I was in middle school, started my first business. And I just, knew that there were a lot of things that I could kind of hedge risk with by like I started a computer repair company. That was my first business. Made flyers, put them around town, had a lot of word of mouth. I hedged that by saying, if I can't fix your computer, I won't charge you for it.
You had a strong guarantee.
Yeah. So, that was just and that kind of evolved, just mainly it was during the late 90s, early 2000s, and it turned into building websites, and back then websites were still fairly new, so building them, I just was determined to learn. And if there was something that I didn't know, I would just research it enough until I did. So I started building websites. And my parents were really confused because all these money orders.
Tim, how did you learn these skills? Did you just read some books about it? Are you just naturally good with your hands? How did you learn that? Because I went to school
primarily on the internet. I just researched. And
I'm not good with my hands, and I went to school for 2 years to learn an MCP, and I actually worked in hardware doing a computer repair for 3 years. So that's interesting. We had that in common. I'm guessing you're more naturally good at that than I was. You didn't need as much education. Sounds like.
For me, it was just a lot of just trial and error and just learning. And one of the things to consider.
What do you think drew that to you? Did you just like the idea that this is something new? What drew you to computer repair specifically, and then websites?
Yeah. So ultimately, I mean, the area, and being in a rural area where there's not much to do, I was, I didn't play sports. I was kind of this, very shy, awkward kid, didn't, wasn't really into that. So it was kind of like just filling the gap of, what to do. So it was like when I wasn't in school, I was learning and researching online. Computer repair, that was really kind of just the foundation of this is something that I know people are asking me to do. Even teachers at school, would ask for help and things like that. So I saw an opportunity there. But yeah, it was all self-taught. And then really whenever I got into the web design, that was kind of self-taught, too. But I started seeing a big shift in that everyone, thought what I was doing was technical, but it was really more on the business side, because I always found like, sales and marketing was just kind of came naturally. And, just a lot of simple ideas, like even as a teenager, I was putting, little display ads in the newspaper and putting up flyers and all that, just reinvesting the money that I was making. And
Tim, you were the PT Barnum of Richwood. You were the best young promoter.
Yeah, and and then what ultimately was kind of probably the biggest tipping point for me, I mean, I was making six figures in middle school. I was planning, to go to college, had actually toured a lot of them, and it was, I, was kind of on that path. But in the middle school, high school phase, I really got into recurring revenue with web hosting. And I had started a web hosting company back then, that it was just a fairly small in comparison to everything today. But back then, people, it was kind of like, I make this website for someone, charge them
Mm-hmm.
a few $1,000s or whatever it was back then for it. And then they had to buy web hosting somewhere. So, and they have to pay for that web hosting every month, because web
Right.
hosting is like, it's basically the server that the website lives on. So it's connected
Mm-hmm.
to the internet. And so I got a
Yeah, I got
reseller
my web
account.
hosting in 2007, and I'm still with them. It's
Yep.
been 13 years, and I
Yeah.
collect recurring revenue for
Because
them for
if
the last 14 years now.
yeah, because if you cancel that and you don't switch to another service or whatever, then your website's not going to be up. It's going to be down. So,
Mm-hmm.
I started offering web hosting, and just kind of, again, just the entry barrier for it at the time was fairly low, because you could get what's called a reseller account, where you're basically sharing space on a server, and then you would set up a sub account for all of your clients and just mark it
Mm-hmm.
up. And I saw the compounding effect of that, in terms of, once someone is set up, then they're going to pay every month, or so in some cases annually or whatever, but it's going to be an ongoing thing. So there's,
Mm-hmm.
money coming in, and there's not a whole lot of work that needs to be done to maintain it, except keeping your servers up and running and secure. Since I was just reselling another company's service, I didn't really have to deal with that.
Yeah, they
So
do all the
all I
work, and
had to
you can just
do,
do the sales and get the cash flow. Get
yeah,
cut of the cash flow.
and occasionally, a little bit of customer service, nothing too major. And then
Mm-hmm.
also, it gave me the ability to be able to charge for updates to the website and things like
Mm-hmm.
that, And so I ended up not taking the college path,
Mm-hmm.
because I came extremely close, and I was actually enrolled, ready to go. And I finished high school early, moved out of my parents' house when I was 17,
Mm-hmm.
on high school graduation day, and was planning to go to college the next year. I moved to my first apartment, then, because I had all this income coming in. I was in middle school making six figures the entire time.
So where was the apartment at? Was it New York or California or somewhere else?
So it was actually in the northern part of the state, that
Okay.
was actually near the college that I was going to go to. But it was
Okay.
in it was about 2 hours away, but it was a little bit more developed part of the state. I mean,
Was
still
it
small.
up by the Pennsylvania border, up in the
Yeah,
northern part?
yeah, it was in the northern part. Yep. And so I got that, but it there was this conflict in me that I'm kind of like, I'm making so much money right now, and a lot of the classes and stuff that I was going to have to take, at college, I'm like, this is not, I don't see how this is going to help me. And
Right.
I knew that I would have a hard time, uh, you know, dealing with some of that, and wanting to do it, knowing that uh, learning more about business, and just growing my business and applying things would be better. So I ended up not
You
going.
figured out what Peter Thiel did. That's why he pays people to not go to college and start a business
Yeah,
instead. You
and,
figured out experientially.
and
So can I ask
and
a question, Tim? Before we
yeah,
go into this section of this life about the conflict in this age, I want to go back to middle school.
sure.
Um, Oftentimes our parents want to protect us. All parents want to guide and empower their kids to have a successful life. We don't want the kids to be disappointed, but at the same time, it's like if someone has entrepreneurial vision, you don't want to steal someone's joy or potential, right? And so, what were those conversations like when you're getting? I'm guessing you didn't have a merchant account because you're getting money orders. So people are sending you like $3,000 money orders to build a website for them, or $5,000 money
Yeah,
orders,
I was
something like
getting
this.
money
So
orders, and
what
yeah,
were these conversations like? Son, are the authorities going to show up? Like, what's going on here? Like, what was that
yeah,
conversation like?
yeah. I think that they wanted to protect me, and since they didn't understand what was happening, because they didn't really use computers at the time,
So
so they
did you
didn't.
explain your business model to them, and did they finally figure it out, or what happened?
I tried to. I don't know if they fully understood it.
Uh-huh.
And so their concern was always like, you're not doing anything illegal, right? And you're not like selling drugs or something, right? And like
Mm-hmm.
the other thing to keep in mind is that I was making significantly more money than they were.
You're probably
And
doubling your
so
parents' income or more, maybe tripling.
so that was kind of another thing that was this, red flag, I guess, to them, and that they didn't understand it, and it was kind of like, you're not out like doing labor, you're not doing labor and working and stuff, so why are you making this money? And it was just a
They
whole
had E
different
quadrant
thing.
thinking and you had B quadrant thinking, and it's like,
Yep.
unless someone wants to learn a new vocabulary and way of thinking, it's hard for them to get it. So that's what
Yeah.
you're dealing with. Wow. So at least you got them convinced that I'm not doing anything illegal. I'm working as a business person and it's working.
Yeah, I
And they
mean,
weren't afraid of the cops showing up.
yeah, there were some times, that it was kind of tense like that, and it was and I was just like, listen, I'll get emancipated, so you're either gonna deal with it or you're not.
Mm-hmm.
And
So what were the conversations like with the bankers? Did you ever have a bank teller say, oh, what do you do, young Timothy? What was the bank teller conversation?
so at first,
When you
yes,
turned
but
16, you probably had some 22-year-old bank tellers hitting on you, didn't you, Tim?
well, the thing is, like, since it was such a small town, one of the things that kind of happened, which was really interesting, because when I was younger, I was this really shy, unpopular kid, and then
Mm-hmm.
suddenly, middle school, I'm like, I'm on newspapers. I had a magazine cover, all these like features about being a young entrepreneur. So I was like
Mm-hmm.
this local celebrity in the small town. So everyone kind of knew who I was, and that I did something on the internet,
So you had someone
something
from
with
the local
computers.
paper call you and say, I'm calling for Timothy Dick, and then they ask you about your business
Oh
or
yeah,
about you.
the not only local, but at the state level, there were, there were quite a few. Like, even like the school that I went to got extra recognition from the state. I was going to
Mm-hmm.
like these, like I remember going with like my school principal and the county superintendent to the
Mm-hmm.
state board of education meeting at the Capitol to get recognition there. And so I was getting a lot of recognition and publicity there, and it was limited really to a small town, though. And
Mm-hmm.
I even had one instance. This was back when they were very popular, where I ended up not getting getting chosen for it, but I was actually one of a handful of people that were in a pilot for a Dell commercial. And
Wow.
they were kind of taking a few like entrepreneurs, and like they liked the idea of like young entrepreneur, so they shot a pilot for that.
They want to show
And
what's possible, what you can do with your Dell computer. You can start a
yeah,
business.
and
Yeah.
all the teachers, in the school, they were very supportive. And they, I was like a really good kid, but they were supportive. So being in a small town and with a small school, they're
Mm-hmm.
limited in terms of what they can offer. And so, like, in
So
terms of
Timothy,
classes,
I have to ask this. Did
yeah.
you watch the movie October Sky? And if you did, how much did you relate to it? Because I've read the book Rocket Boys and watched the movie. So have you
I
watched
have
it?
actually never seen it. I'm not
Have
a
you
real
heard
big
about it?
movie guy. No, no.
Do you like to read books? Do you ever read autobiography books or biography books?
Yeah, occasionally. I'm generally more of like a nonfiction guy,
Mm-hmm.
the more like personal development type books,
So
but
if
yeah,
you like
occasionally.
personal development, I would recommend read the book Rocket Boys, because
Okay,
I've never seen this before. Usually the movie is a third as good as the book because there's not a lot of details that they can't put in there, right? There's a time
right.
limitation. But when I read the book, I'm like, there is literally nothing in here that wasn't in the movie. So the book is more written like a nonfiction adventure, even though it is a real story. So I'd encourage you to check it out, because I'll just give you two little commonalities so you can discover the rest.
Sure.
This kid has a dad who is the manager of the coal mine in their town. It's called Coalwood, so very similar to your name. And the mine is dying, and this kid sees Sputnik, and he's like, I want to go into space. And his dad like, kid, get your head out of the clouds,
Yeah.
we're coal miners. And but he has a supportive teacher, and she's like, hey, look, if you commit to getting good at math and figure out this rocketry stuff and can actually build a rocket, like you could win the national science fair. She's like, you could maybe win state or maybe even nationals. Like he had one teacher who believed in him, and that was all he needed to deal with all of the doubt of everybody else around him. And he had some other
Yeah.
people in the community who were supporting him also. So I think you might really enjoy that book because it reads like a nonfiction story.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Yeah.
And you have a lot. It's a real story. You have a lot in common with the guy. So I think you might really
Yeah.
enjoy that.
Yeah. So, what ended up happening, is I just kind of continued on, with the web hosting after I moved out, and had built it into a decent size. I mean, I would consider it small now, but small base. And I still wanted to move away, out of West Virginia and just go to a big city. And
Right.
so I actually ended up kind of selling that company and taking a job, an executive job, as VP of Business Development for an existing web hosting company in upstate New York. Moved up there. I was there for a few years, and it was definitely a good experience in terms of getting me. I moved away. Getting used to that, but I wasn't really happy with the way that was going. And so after a few years we just had very different ways of looking at business. I ended up, my friend that I had met online on an industry message board had started HostGator, Brent, at the time from his dorm room in Florida, and it was starting to get some traction. And he said, hey, do you want to move down from New York to Florida? And he's like, you could be just whatever. He's like a vice president or COO. He's just helped me grow the company, because at that time he was mainly doing everything himself, but it was just growing so fast, he couldn't keep up. So I did,
So you were not a rabid Georgia Bulldogs fan. You were fine going to a company with Gator and the name of the company.
Yeah, and it was something. So I moved down to Boca, because that's where we were based. But ended up moving. I mean, I expected to move there, and everything would remain there for a while. But one of the things that we figured out very quickly is that real estate prices were still very high there. This was before the crash. And we also had a lot of problems hiring there. So
this is like 0506 during peak real estate mania.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so we needed a bigger office, and we were looking, and it was like we wanted to buy something for what we could get. It was like get like a 5 to 10,000 square foot office condo for $10 million in Florida, which we would outgrow pretty quickly. Even though we didn't realize the extent, it's something that we still thought it was a little small. And then we would still have problems hiring people because the cost of living is high, and hiring for customer service and tech support positions was tough. And so we ended up looking at Texas, mainly just due to economic and low cost of living, and the fact that there were other hosting companies there that we knew that we would be able to kind of poach some employees from. And so instead
in Dallas,
of
there's
getting
a lot of tech workers. People don't realize it, but there's a lot of technology companies, Fortune ones, based in Dallas. So that's really smart. And then VAs
we
the
were
VA industry
Houston.
wasn't really big yet, right? The VA industry wasn't really big yet. So yeah, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, even Austin, a lot of tech people. So that's cool. So you guys settled on Houston.
We went to Houston. So everything, with HostGator. So HostGator was kind of a catalyst for a lot of things for me. HostGator was not my company. I didn't start it. I was one of the first C-level executives, and the founder of the company is just 3 years older than me, and so we figured out a lot together, in terms of like, going there, because when we went to Texas, compared to that 5 to 10,000 square foot office condo we could get for 10 million in Florida, we paid 3.5 million for a 35,000 square foot building in Texas.
You got 10x the ROI for your dollar on real estate space.
And the goal with it, it was a 4-story building. The 4th floor we were going to use. The 3rd floor down was all leased. And so, it was a cash flowing property, and we thought we'll never outgrow this. And I remember when we moved and, we were there, it's like, this is an insane amount of space. And we actually had to learn how to deal with property management and managing commercial real estate. Like, we had already bought the building, and then like basically the old owner had retired, and his personal secretary stayed on with us for the first few months to help teach us about all the things that go into the building and help us get situated in Houston. And we didn't know any of the stuff. We're like, what are CAM fees? What is triple net? Like, what is all this stuff? And like, we had all these tenants.
You're like, we're a web hoster. We're not a real estate developer.
Yeah.
What's going on here?
But we learned and we figured it out, but we didn't need to for long, because we thought we would be the 4th floor. It's over 10,000 square feet alone. The other 3, we'll never need them. Within a year, the building was maxed out. So, then all with us, we had to just start non-renewing, and we grew, and HostGator just kind of exploded, but in a very good way, and within a few years, had close to 1,000 employees, hosted about 3 million websites. And, it was, just a magic set of circumstances that came together. For me though, it wasn't my baby. I was part of the team, but I wanted to do something. And the founder of HostGator that owned the company, he actually was really pushing for me to start something new, because he said, hey, can you go start something? I just want to invest in it, have a minority stake. You can do whatever you want. I'm just like too concentrated in this one company.
So Tim, can I ask you 2 questions?
Yeah.
One is, I think for the audience watching, it's very instructive to model what Tim did. He saw you attempted to work through challenges with this other company and how things were done. You figured out we're just on a different page. So instead of trying to do a corporate raid takeover like in Pretty Woman, right? Richard Gere, corporate raider, you just left and found greener pasture. There's always opportunity elsewhere. I think that's one lesson. Number 2, what I wanted to ask you is, when you came on with HostGator, it's almost like a Steve Ballmer being employee number 20 at Microsoft. Like, it wasn't his company, but he added a lot of value to it. So did, while maintaining confidentiality, did you sort of negotiate a piece of equity because you knew your value at that point? You'd already been successful in business. The guy recognized your value, or so maybe later on he just gave you some because he recognized your value. Either way, the fact that he wanted to invest in you
so in terms of it,
it's okay being a Steve Ballmer, right? For people, you don't have to always be the founder. If you could work with a Bill Gates and get the knowledge and then go start your own thing. So there's different ways to approach it.
So the best way to put it is that I did not he didn't because he owned the entire company, so he didn't really give anyone equity, but I did benefit financially quite a bit. I'll just say that without getting into the details. And
if you can bootstrap it like Russell did with his partners with ClickFunnels, if you're not looking to investor money, it gives you a lot more flexibility. Then you can just give some profit share as you want to different employees.
So HostGator was eventually sold to a private equity group for $310 million. So it was a decent exit, but a few years before that, kind of like while we were, in the peak growing, things were good, but like I said, the founder Brent, had said, hey, go start something. I want to invest in it. And at the time, I started VoIPO in the voice over IP phone service industry. Back then, the iPhone wasn't out.
Can I ask you one quick question about that? So in the midst of conversations, you try to work things out with the New York company, it doesn't happen, you go to HostGator. What were those conversations between you and Brent like? Did you come to him and say, hey, look, I'm loving this, my entrepreneurial itch is I need to scratch it? Or did he come to you and say, look, you've already owned your own companies, you're a known commodity, I like you, I trust you, I'd love to be diversified? Like, what were those conversations like? Because some people are
Yeah,
nervous to have those talks with an employer
right.
or with a business partner. I think it'd be very instructive for people to hear what those like that.
It was kind of a combination. He approached, like, we'd kind of mutually, open the discussion. I just said, I'm leaving here. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
How's HostGator doing? And then there was kind of this discussion where it was like, he immediately did bring up wanting to start something, and he said, can you start something? I want to invest it, something that ideally had synergy, with HostGator, because
Okay.
HostGator had 3 million customers, so he said, do something. I wasn't entirely on board with that, and I knew that it would take a long time,
Mm-hmm.
to start. And so what we ended up doing is, like, he knew that I could bring a lot of value to HostGator as well. And so it was kind of like, plant that seed of starting something. And if you don't want to do it right now, hold on, uh, come to HostGator. I'm not even sure what you're going to do, but I'm good with it. And,
Mm-hmm.
and that way, you can have, you'll have a nice salary, all of that. And you can think about building something with, out the risk of just dropping
Ah,
everything.
that's
So
cool. So you guys almost came up with a hybrid model from the
yeah.
beginning.
So
So once you
I mean,
had
I had a
really,
very,
that
very
makes sense.
healthy salary at HostGator, and all the, and it was something that, and I helped a lot with, a lot of strategic stuff, because in a way it actually helped that I was not as involved, like, with super day-to-day stuff,
Right.
because I had I knew everything that was going on to an extent, but uh, from the big picture standpoint, and the financials and all that I knew, but I wasn't involved as much with a lot of the day-to-day operations. So I was a really close advisor for him. And I did eventually start VoIPO. He invested, the he said, okay, here's $1 million to get started, and he had a minority stake in it, but it was designed from the beginning, to be my baby. And our agreement was that he was an investor, and he would
Mm-hmm.
not be involved in any way with the company, because he was too busy with HostGator anyway. But it was kind
Right.
of like, that was one of the reasons that I agreed to it, was because I had the freedom to do things and run things the way that I wanted, build things the way that I wanted. And we already had that trust, and he
Mm-hmm.
knew what I was capable of, because of HostGator, and what I had contributed there. So I started VoIPO. Took a few years to build. Building a phone company takes a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the big things was that it goes back to, it was that subscription revenue, phone service. Everybody pays their phone bill every month, and we knew
Mm-hmm.
that there was a customer base at HostGator that service could be sold to.
Yeah.
So
If you get 10 or 15% of them, you can just long tail market,
yeah,
offer this to them, and more are going to
yeah.
come over to it.
And so once VoIPO took off and was taking more and more of my time, I just phased out more and more from HostGator. And then I was still still an advisor every now and then, but, like, I was focused on building VoIPO. And so there was a few years that there was overlap. And then whenever I actually built VoIPO, up to the point where it was basically my full focus, I decided to move, because I just did not like Houston. And
Uh-huh.
it just, for whatever reason, I just didn't like it. So I looked at other places, and I ended up moving to Southern California, where I'm at
Mm-hmm.
now. So I've been here, I guess, since 2011, 12, something like that.
Uh-huh. Houston
And
has good barbecue, but you didn't like the smog.
yeah, and it was, I I actually had a CTO at the time, that he was originally from here, from Southern California, and he had moved to Houston, to work for me, but he had quit a few times because he wanted to go back to California. And so he kind of convinced me. I knew that I wanted to move. I looked at, a couple different places, but finally ended up on California. And it was a little bit of a tough decision because I knew that I was going into a high regulatory, high tax, high cost, place. But
did you set up your trust like the Rockefellers before you went there?
There's definitely some planning and apportionment of revenue and stuff that can be done. But
if you're going to California, tax planning is very important.
Yeah, but for me, like I looked at it as kind of like a lifestyle thing, and I thought, this is somewhere that I could see myself staying, for long term. And so even if it costs a little more, I'm okay with it. I was already pretty financially secure at that point. And so, I've been here, I will say that after 10 years, there's been times, that I'm tempted to move, so it's not perfect, but it's a pretty good place,
And you thinking about buying a house next door to brother Elon over in Austin?
I don't know. It's tempting sometimes. I think Texas, Nevada, Arizona, they're always kind of tempting because the political climate is a little better for business, and just they either are all no income tax or low income tax states. So I don't know, but at the same time, like I'm established here, and I haven't I don't know, it's one of those ideas that comes up. It would be nice to move, save a little bit of money sometimes.
If you meet a sexy Filipina from Arizona or Texas, that might seal the deal. I'm just saying that because I'm married to a Filipina, Tim. So
so where with VoIPO, what's interesting is VoIPO is actually started in 2006. So VoIPO will actually be 15 years old in May.
Happy advanced anniversary, sir. That's awesome.
Thank you.
So I want to ask you about scaling and next level, because you started investing in other companies from there. So I think it sounds like you really developed your skill set of working with bigger teams and experiencing a fast scaling business, and you really applied that to investing in other things. So I wanted to ask you, you guys ran into this real estate challenge with HostGator of the building because you have to house the servers. Was that not as big of an issue with VoIPO because of miniaturization, or was that a challenge with that too? We needed a building to keep your.
With HostGator, the only thing we used the building for was just our offices. We actually had all of our servers in a third-party data center, which is now an IBM facility. IBM
so pre-Amazon AWS, you had another place like that you were using.
Right, and then they eventually turned into IBM. They got acquired. But we basically leased servers and put them there because and some companies kind of looked at that and they're kind of like, why do you guys not have your own servers? You have 20,000 leased servers there. Like, why wouldn't you just do your own? The math has to work, and you would save money. And we're like, well, we would save money and whatever, but they do a really good job there at keeping those things online. B, if anything happens to them, they've got to replace them. So we don't have a capital expenditure, and it's something that we just did not see it as being the best place to invest our money. I mean, we did explore
your time. Your time was better invested in just getting more people on.
And then also building the team, because with the data center, it's like there's so much that goes into it. Like HVAC is a massive deal because with that many servers, there's cooling, the networking component, so we knew that building a team for that, we just thought, what, if we can pay them a few $100s a month for each server, and we're able to put 2,000 to 4,000 customers on it that are paying us $20 a month,
right?
Then
that's good math.
Why not? And so
that's good
our
math,
expense, let's invest in customer service, customer experience, providing the best, 24-hour customer service, really focusing on that, because, and that's really what propelled, HostGator's growth. And
Mm-hmm.
so with VoIPO, it was kind of the same. We we have servers, with IBM. We've moved a lot to Amazon and Google Cloud now, and taken advantage of some of that. But it kind of, that's one of the things that a lot of businesses, I think, don't realize, because there's this ego versus bank account thing, where it's like sometimes businesses are like, well, saying that I have my own servers versus, I'm leasing these servers, in another facility, and I own this building and I own this and I own that. It's like, saying that might sound like it has more prestige, but at the end of the day, it's significantly more profitable to not have to deal with
Right.
that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's something that a lot of business owners do. It's like sometimes you have to really look at decisions that you're making, or problems or opportunities, and think about, is this something that makes sense, financially for the business, for the
Mm-hmm.
long-term plans of the business, or is it just kind of a vanity thing?
Yeah, it seems like the ego thing is always pulling you, whether it's your own or other people sort of feeding you with
Yeah.
ideas. And that's a big thing that Solomon talks about. I'm a big fan of King
Hmm.
Solomon, and he's like, hey, wisdom comes from before honor, or humility comes before honor, pride comes before a fall. It's like, it
Hmm.
seems like the more successful you get, the more you need to guard against ego. And I think there's two things that help with that. One is having good advisors that you regularly get counsel from, and then number two, um, uh, it's just like consistently humbling yourself and like just be analytical, like do a SWOT analysis and look at it analytically and not from a place of ego. And this will sound cool. It's like, well, how much time is it going to take to manage your own service, learn all these other things? Like,
Yeah.
keep the main thing, like the Keller Williams guy said. So Tim, what was your experience with that, building VoIPO after working at HostGator? Like, because it seems like you've done a good job managing your time. How did you become like a true, really great B quadrant business owner, where the business runs without you? Because a lot of people seem to get stuck at that
Hmm.
level of the business is making a few million, but it still needs them. Like, what enabled you to make that shift?
Yeah. So I think one of the big things is just that I've always tried to keep things very simple with VoIPO, and the way that it's structured and what we offer. Like, one example is just that, and this was a difference from HostGator. HostGator did not do remote working. That was just not,
Mm-hmm.
everybody worked in the office 3 shifts a day to have 24 hours, whatever. But I was, from the beginning with VoIPO, I believed in remote work. So we did
Mm-hmm.
have an office, but we, even though we were California based, that was just kind of like corporate, and so
Mm-hmm.
we could have employees in Texas and other states, and then eventually in other countries like the Philippines, that helped us, so we weren't paying the cost of living, the wages that are the cost of living for California, because that would not make sense for a lot of customer service positions for the
Right.
business. But it also reduced complexity, and because one thing I've learned, from I'm, in the office is, the more people you get, the more there is to deal with, and then it's
Right.
just more to manage. So I kept things very simple, and always have. I think I didn't have the influence, and HostGator didn't have the influence of outside funds or debt or any of that stuff stressing us to grow the business
Right.
fast. Because if you take VC money or angel money, uh, it it needs to be spent fast. Because
Mm-hmm.
there's no investor that likes to just give a company money just so it sits there. They
Right.
want to
Right.
see win, fail, whatever, spend it and see, because they want to know, if it's a win, how can we give you more money? And if it's a fail, then they can move on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that we didn't have that influence. So VoIPO, I kept the growth pretty organic, but since it is a recurring subscription based business, I mean, today, like, we have some customers that have been with us for like 12, 13, 14 years. paying their phone bill every month. And so I kind of naturally, got the opportunities, especially after HostGator sold. I had, was already fully focused on VoIPO, but
Right.
I had a lot of, I had some contact during that time and was involved some in that process. So I met, you made some connections, at funds and things like that. And I just started making micro investments. Started out small, and then I would make ones that were a little more in just the angel world. I mean, and back then, there weren't really all these platforms, that have like crowdfunding, all that kind of stuff. It was more just kind of introductions, and you just get around to meeting someone. And so I invested in a few. Most of those investments completely lost the money, but there were a handful. Like one was Instacart. So that obviously Instacart was just acquired by Uber for $2.5 billion. So even though I had a very small piece in that, that still was a pretty decent amount of money. And another that hasn't exited or anything, but that I have a decent investment in is Zenefits, human resources software. So I would just look at companies that I believed were doing something useful and solving a problem, and that I've always been attracted to companies that they have they can explain very easily how they plan to make money. Because if they can't, and they have like ideas that haven't been but they've never done it, that's where, just from experience, I know there's going to be a lot of trial and error and learning. So I invested in some, and now, I have brokers that just are always checking in to see, what, if I'm looking for anything to invest in. And I've shifted a lot though, because
do you look at a lot at the team? Because I know a lot of angel people look at the team. Like there's a million ideas. Entrepreneurs, you always come up with ideas. The key is how good of a team can you put together? Like it seems like most people are looking to raise funds. They don't realize how important their team is. Like the vision, the ability to explain it simply in the team. Do you find that people err or drop the ball the most or aren't diligent enough on the team side when they're starting out?
I actually don't put as much weight on team as a lot of people do, because you're right. A lot of people do focus on that. I put a lot more weight on the value proposition of like what they're offering and the founder, because oftentimes, like if you have a company that the team that they start with will not necessarily be the team that they finish with. And sometimes if companies are too caught up in building a huge management team, there's a lot of pros with that, but that's also very expensive and adds a lot of complexity. And that's one of the things at HostGator, that we didn't have a lot of layers of management at all, because, we just looked at, one of the things is like, if you have like if your team, especially with a fast growing team, separates you as like the founder or whoever's primarily driving the company, it separates you from the actual delivery of the product or service. So
you'd rather have a lean, really clearly focused founder with some good advisors, not necessarily a bunch of management levels of expense and complexity. You look for this. This is like more the way you look at value prop in a really focused founder. Okay.
And in a lot of cases, those advisors can be external, and they're just on the board, or they're just doing something, they're not like day to day, because, it's just generally it's a much more efficient use of money, for the company. And again, like, you run into all these situations where once they start working together as a team, because maybe it's someone that they worked with at a corporate job, that they've brought in, or someone that is really known for a certain skill that, they brought in. Once they're actually building something together, building a startup is a very high stress, high pressure thing, because it's like the highs are high and the lows are low, and it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter if you have money, if you need money, if you don't have money, it doesn't matter. It's like you can have all the money in the world, but you still have to build something and make it work.
You
And
know how to manage your emotional state and just keep
yeah,
testing and get your message to market right and your
and
deliverables
and
right.
with multiple people, like you just don't know how that's going to pan out. So it's
Mm-hmm.
a factor for some cases, but in general, I'm more founder oriented. And I've actually shifted a lot, because the last few years, especially pre-COVID, uh, basically the interest rates have been so low that I think the valuations of a lot of companies are inflated. And
Right.
because instead of exiting, and the initial angel investors being able to cash out, or get their return, because when you invest as an angel, it's not like you can just sell your share even privately.
Mm-hmm.
The vast majority of the time it's restricted, so you cannot do anything
Yeah, if
unless
you do a
there's a full
PPM, you're locked
liquidity.
up for 2 or 3 years, usually until there's a liquidity, right?
It, well, yeah,
Yeah.
and with a lot of them,
Even if it's a private sale, you're not a public
it's
sale. Yeah.
yeah, and there's actually a lot of them that I've seen over the last few years that they actually ban a private sale. And the reason for that is that they don't want you to do a private sale of your piece of it, even if it's a very small piece. And then the
Mm-hmm.
next time they go to raise money, they use that as a valuation marker.
Right, affects valuations. Yeah.
So
Yeah, so it's
so
almost like
it's
you're
tied
waiting
up.
for the founder. You're waiting for the founder to do a sale. So you're really. That's why I was curious, because like me, I come more from the real estate world, Tim.
Yep.
Like, how often do founders look at fast monetization? Because to me, like, there are some business models, a la you can buy an apartment complex and it's like good cash flow from day one, but those are lower ROIs. I know in the angel world you're looking at a bigger ROI. I'm wondering how often, like, you created a hybrid of let me work with HostGator and get a salary and still have some potential upside, and he wanted you to go found your own company from day one.
Right.
How often do you see deals where there's a hybrid opportunity for a big multiple cash out to make up for those things that lose everything and some cash flow? Like, how often do you see that where there's some kind of a cash flow piece built in?
It really depends on the person. I mean, there are some people that are attracted to one or the other, because
Mm-hmm.
there are some people that, they are really attracted to the vanity of like raising more money and raising another round, and because that sets like an artificial valuation. The one of the shifts that I've made, mainly because of the length of time that it would take to exit or get a return, or it's kind of like the worst thing is having money invested in the company, and on paper they're worth like a ton of money because they've raised more and
Mm-hmm.
more, but they could just go out of business tomorrow and like your shares are worthless. You don't
Right.
actually have, it's just on paper. And so I've shifted a lot more to working with businesses that have like a simple viable model where they are generating cash flow pretty quickly,
Mm-hmm.
and it's
Or their
something
projection
that,
is, hey, within 6 months we can be cash flow positive, something like
yeah,
this.
yeah, and dealing with companies that are focused on generating profit and revenue, because
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that's maybe a little, some people disagree with, is that, but I believe, is that there are times where it makes sense to make sure that you're starting a business that you're passionate about, and that
Mm-hmm.
follow your passion, and don't do something that's not. But the way that I look at it is, most people are much better off starting a business that has a high potential of being successful and
Mm-hmm.
making them money, and then once they have made the money, they have the freedom to take more risks or start things that are
Mm-hmm.
more maybe not going to generate a profit, but it's like a passion project or something.
Yeah, do a bread and butter business model that already has a proven
Yeah.
market. Go be successful in that market, and now you have more options. And
And here's the thing, and this is really what one of the things that I do a lot now. Like, once you have a company that's reached a certain scale, like Voipo is an example, there's a lot of cash flow coming off of that business.
mm-hmm.
So from an investor standpoint, you have the ability to invest in a lot of things,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not like you're always having to just write a check. It's like maybe you have a business that has excess cash flow. So that cash flow can fund, you know, your next project and on and on and on.
Right.
And, so that's something, and there's also synergies with that because there a lot of times, like maybe a small investment or uh, consulting client that I work with that I do like an equity deal with or something, I already have like resources and team and stuff for my primary ventures,
Mm-hmm.
which Voipo is one, Profit Layer is the other. So I can maybe offer services as part of the package to save them money. And
Mm-hmm.
where I've seen a lot of success lately is just working with small businesses. And I
Mm-hmm.
started doing this before COVID. And since COVID hit, though, it's been more and more of a kind of it's turned into like kind of a passion project.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, Tim. I'm glad you said that because I sort of want to, and we've been talking about right around 50
Oh,
minutes
sure.
or so. Um, like you've given so many golden nuggets. You can honor your parents. Like Ratatouille is my favorite animated movie because it's about you can honor your parents and pursue what you want to do, and it's not an either or. Some people literally go and do a career because their parents want them to, and they're miserable. And I'm like, don't freaking sacrifice your life. It's your life just to
Yeah.
make them happy. Like that's insane. Like there's always a way to honor your parents and pursue your dreams. So I appreciate that you do that, and your story just shows good leadership there. And you also showed uh, deal with disagreements with people. Move on if you just have different visions. Look
Yeah.
for hybrid models. Both in how you work in the company. Don't always just only chase your passion. Do something that has a proven model, and then look to innovate within that industry. You don't have to create a whole new industry.
Right.
Oftentimes, most billionaires, they didn't create a new industry. They just innovated 5% or 10% in some area, and then they scaled it, and here they are multi-billionaires. So
Yeah.
I love that. Those are some amazing key things that you brought up. Circling back to family, you mentioned right before we started the interview part that you started to invest in some small companies, even back in West Virginia. I guess you went back to West Virginia fairly recently for the first time in a long time. So I'd love to
Yeah.
hear about that. And I heard you were going to talk with the governor. Like, what kind of things in this COVID era are you seeing are best
Yeah.
ways to empower small businesses and the ways that small business owners could be creative and getting good cash flow, because cash flow pays the bills.
Hmm.
Unless we're in Silicon Valley or the angel world, the tech world, like you got to pay your bills with net profit. So I'd love to hear
Yeah.
your insights on ways you're helping people creatively deal with the COVID government policy and be cash flow positive right now in this season.
Yeah. So a lot of times it kind of starts with consulting and then, but I work with a lot of companies. I work with SaaS companies that are VC funded. I have a few funds
Mm-hmm.
that are clients that I do due diligence for and all that. But I like working the most probably with, the smaller businesses that are maybe in a boring industry, and by boring, I just mean that it's not like a flashy industry. It's like, who knew that, what the profit margins are on mobile home sales or
Mm-hmm.
on funeral homes. Funeral homes make a lot of money. Like there's all these little businesses that there's not all this crazy. All the marketers aren't chasing. But
Mm-hmm.
if you go into that company and basically give them even a tenth of what the online marketers are kind of teaching and going after
Mm-hmm.
all these industries, like you probably get messages all the time, hey, I can get you leads for your business, and it's like they're not approaching brick and mortar and small businesses because they just
Right.
think, well, how much money could that company make? But if you take a small business, like in my hometown, one of the things that I did is uh, set up a small retail store there in town, and it's actually profitable. It's doing well. A lot of stores have failed in the area, but
Is it
one of
called
the
Timmy D's? Come on, let's give the store a
no,
shout
it's
out.
called Becky's Bargain Barn.
Oh, very
Uh,
nice.
so beckysbargainbarn.com, or they're on Facebook, Becky's Bargain Barn. Becky was our family dog growing up. We had her for about 20 years. So she was a pretty special dog. So we named it after
Uh-huh.
her. And here's where I looked at things differently whenever, I did that, and I encourage all my
Mm-hmm.
clients and I do in other investments. A lot of people would just if they want to open a store there, they just open a store.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the reality: it's a small town, small population. There's only so much market share available. I mean, it's, it's in this town, to give you an idea, you've got to drive over an hour just to get to Walmart, and that's where you buy your groceries. So
Oh,
the
wow.
only thing in town is like a dollar store, and a gas station, things like that. So the odds are the success rate of like a standalone retail store, there's just not enough volume to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I actually did is I actually had an existing business that I had been running from California for a few years, where I would
Uh-huh.
buy like truckloads and pallets of liquidated merchandise mainly from stores that were going out of business. So like
Mm-hmm.
when a lot of stores close locations, they don't move the inventory around, they just auction it off for like 10 cents on the dollar. And so I would get that, and I already had this business out here in California where we were
Mm-hmm.
buying those and then listing the items online. So we
Yeah,
were
like before Dress
taking,
Barn sold to Ty Lopez, they probably liquidated
exactly,
a ton of their inventory to people like you buying it.
because they didn't have an online presence. So
Mm-hmm.
we would sell on Amazon, eBay, even the marketplace sites, because it was very easy, to sell. If you sold a handful of items out of a pallet, that pays for the whole pallet. You just have a lot of extra stuff left that might be more slow moving inventory, but you've
Mm-hmm.
already recouped your money. And West Virginia, there aren't a lot of jobs. My younger brother, I started sending him some of our overflow, and just said,
Let's
"You
say
want
you
to
send
list
the
this on
pallets
eBay?"
there so they can manage
And
fulfillment, like create jobs for the
he
county.
started out listing on eBay. And
Mm-hmm.
interestingly, the post office there, it's tiny town. There's like two people at the post office. They're only open like 4 hours a day. They put out a sign like out to lunch, and we have shipped over 20,000 packages through that post office in
Are
the
they up to
last
4 employees
year.
now? Do they have 2 extra employees because of you?
I know they have to grow, but here's the
Uh-huh.
thing.
They're gonna have
So
to start doing 8-hour days soon. You're gonna get them to work.
what there's definitely a demand there, because like a lot of people, we could have continued selling online, but I by having the online fulfillment and warehousing there, that was a huge cost savings for me compared to
Mhm.
California. Real
Talk
estate,
about
your
cheap real
labor,
estate.
all
Yeah,
that.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah, and then on top of it, though, what happened is like, there's definitely a need for more shopping there. Because like I said, you have to drive over an hour to get to Walmart, and that's, other than that, you have a dollar store, and that's it. And we had,
Mhm.
our stuff is such a variety. One of the challenges of selling it online is that we had items in every category. I mean, right now we have about 300,000 items, and we're talking across everything from toys, clothes, shoes, high-end brands, low-end brands, uh, housewares, anything. It's really odd that sometimes people would come into the office and they're like, they would be kind of joking, and they would ask if we had something in the warehouse, and I'm like, we probably do. Like, and we
Mhm.
did. I mean, we just had such a variety. So what we ended up doing there is I thought, what if we could open a store where it's also the warehouse and fulfillment center, but if someone wants to buy something locally, just have it synced, the inventory is synced up, so it just
Mhm.
removes it from the online inventory and they buy it locally.
It's
And
almost like a local Ollie's. Like you never know what you're gonna find, and new stuff is always there, so it makes it an adventure in a way.
but the big difference is, instead of trying to just set up like a retail store to solve that problem, you know
Mhm.
I took the hybrid approach of, we're gonna need this building, we're gonna need people there handling the online orders and all of that. So why not just add a little storefront and open it up, and that combination keeps it very profitable, versus like
Mhm.
struggling to maintain the volume. Another example of, because the more that I got into that, I'm like, there are so many places where there are struggling towns or struggling businesses that maybe it's a small business that's struggling.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be that they could even be in a large city. It's not necessarily the scale. Every situation is unique, but they are trying to do things one way. They're trying to do
Mm-hmm.
things the way they've always done it or the way they're supposed to. And they're not looking at things differently. So an example could be like, going back to like small towns, the thing with that is like there's a real big need for a grocery store in that town,
Right.
but and they've had a few that have went out of business. The challenge is always everybody wants it, but their prices do have to be a little bit higher than Walmart
You got to cover all the
because,
extra shipping costs to the town.
well,
It's
and you
rural,
have
it's
the
remote.
inventory. So then you have to time your inventory to figure out, well, we can't get stuff that will go bad, but how many
Mm-hmm.
people are going to shop? And sometimes people will drive and, pay less. And so the town, is looking at like, how do we get a grocery store? And, I started talking to, some of the people that were in the local government. I'm like, okay, I think that's the wrong approach. Because they're just like, what if we offer a free building? Let's pitch Kroger's and all these companies come and open a grocery store. And I'm like, the economics of that are not going to work. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter how you do it. Why don't we explore things like, they don't have like Instacart and Uber and stuff like that there. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
but what if we could leverage Walmart's prices that everybody likes and create some sort of delivery or pickup service where it's like the investment really is just buying like a few vans and
Have a
basically
cargo
take
van pick up
orders.
20 people's groceries instead of
I'm
20
like,
people all
yeah,
driving to Walmart, right?
and
Yeah, that's smart.
people in town can place the orders, and charge a small service fee, and then people go pick it up, bring it back, and I'm like, that solves the problem. Now some people see that as they're like, well, that's really complicated, but if you break it down, it's really not when you're comparing it to like having to project your inventory with a lot of uncertainty and the overhead
Mm-hmm.
of staffing a full store and all of that. And what I've found is that in a lot of towns, I have the advantage in my hometown because I was this everybody, or not everybody, but I was a local celebrity. I've moved away and I've been away for a while, but my name is still recognizable there. And so I had the advantage, and I figured out that
Is there a Tim Dick Avenue yet? We got to get you an avenue, Tim.
no, but there's a lot of like public private partnerships that are
Uh-huh.
available. People just don't look for them and they're not creative, where
Mm-hmm.
it's like, the government will match, like I've got, a couple of things that it's like, if you are interested in putting this type of business here, we will match dollar for dollar everything you invest, give you free property that the government already owns that is not in use. You just have to
Mm-hmm.
agree to, like remodel it to suit, the business and stuff. And there's a lot of government money available, but most of the proposals that they get for utilizing that money and accessing grants and matching funds and tax abatements and things like that are
Mm-hmm.
on a very big scale. And when someone comes in and it's like, instead of building a grocery store, it's like, really the cost for this is just vans and a little office, like
Mm-hmm.
we don't, it's like a very low
Yeah,
amount. So
instead of a
it's,
$3 million project, you're doing like, hey, a $300,000 project. We want to buy
oh,
10 vans for
even less
30
than
grand
that.
each, or I
Yeah.
know, it might
Yeah.
only be like 150 or something. Yeah.
And it's like, it's so you can rapidly test it. So I really like things like that, and I'm talking to them, I'm talking to like the governor's office and a few others that they're very interested in working together because I have a track record in other businesses, uh, and I could approach it from a creative standpoint. Like another
Mm-hmm.
concept there is no gym there. So there, and obesity and health problems, it's a huge issue there. There are a
Right.
lot of people even on Medicare that Medicare and a lot of insurance companies provide like if you have a gym membership, they will like reimburse you $25 a month or something like that, you know, and there's nowhere to use it at there. And so there are some people that are like, well, a gym in town with memberships, that's a big risk. And so one of the proposals that we're talking about now is like, what about setting up a gym and, you know, really getting people enrolled that have that money from their insurance company just not being used, get them enrolled in it. But again, standalone gym, you know, how much volume can you do? Add in, you know, other services. So like one big one that we're looking at is like just have some extra rooms where maybe they're, you know, have a chiropractor or some alternative medicines that can come in like once a week.
So it can be a whole little health complex versus just a gym.
Yeah. And then
like 4
another
businesses
big
in one
one,
place.
well, another big one is like in the small towns, like I'm amazed at like how long it takes to get a doctor's appointment and stuff. I'm used to here in OC, it's like, you know, like the same or next day, you know, and there it's like, it's sometimes it can be weeks just because of the physical. It's like, well, that doctor is only in your area like twice a month.
They're
So
traveling doctors. Yeah.
those slots fill really quick. So that was something for like a gym or something. It's like a lot of people there will not use telehealth because they're just not tech savvy. So, you know, set up like a few private rooms with computers, you know, things like that, and have someone come in to encourage them to use telehealth so they can get faster, better care. But they get the reassurance of if the computer has a problem or there's some tech issue that they have, there's someone out there that can help them.
They have telehealth with concierge service.
Yeah, and it's like
make it easily accessible.
Adding those things, you know, together makes things work, you know. So it's the same, it's a simple concept, but it's like, you know, layering things together, you know, that's with Profit Layer, you know, a lot of it's layering different components of the business. You know, you can solve a lot of problems in a unique way, reduce the risk, and be able to have viable things. But the problem again, you know, is just that like I see this over and over where people even approach me and they're like, you know, do you like, are you interested in, or do you know anyone that's that would be interested in investing in or opening whatever kind of business? But then they're looking at it as like the way things have always been done though, you know. And
yeah, they're not bringing innovation. Bringing innovation is what's key to bring an industry progress. So I appreciate you're bringing innovation to solving small town challenges.
Yeah.
A lot of people, they only want to invest in a thing that can become an Instacart and sell for billions of dollars. And it's like you said, there's a lot of money in smaller businesses if you add a little innovation to them.
Yeah, and you know, and the thing is, I mean, really, if you have say like a business that's kind of a typical small business, you know, that maybe they only, you know, maybe they only profit like, you know, $200,000 a year. But if it's structured in a way where like an investor, you can recoup your money and then you get just like a 20% royalty or something, that adds up, you know. And it's like, and you have someone there that they're still making, they still have their business, so it's their baby, and they're making, you know, what they are considered to be a very good income. They're very happy, and they're happy to give, you know, a royalty to someone that can make that happen.
It's like buying an apartment complex or a mobile home park, but instead of making your cash flow on his housing, you're making cash flow on helping more viable businesses support the local economy. So that's like a cool, there's like multiple layers of wins, like the profit layer, right? There's also win layers, a lot of layers of wins.
Yeah, and it's something that like
profitable for health, profitable for families, profitable for the economy, profitable at many layers. Yeah.
You know, an example, even out here in California, that's, you know, we're obviously not a small town, you know, here in Orange County, the county alone is a few million people. And I've had consulting clients here, like I had a few that were like personal trainers, or they're in fitness or some sort of, one was like yoga, and then traditional training. And, you know, they're competing in like a very crowded market. You know, there's a lot of trainers, and they're always like, how do I stand out? like, what do I do? And so some of the things that we've done that have just completely turned their business around was, I'm like, why don't we approach some apartment complexes that have a nice gyms and everything, and just say, hey, can I teach a free class once a month for all your residents? And so now you have a new perk to offer to your residents, a personal trainer once a month that's going to do a class, and in turn they will pick up private clients from that.
Right.
And little things like that it's like, they're like, I can do that. And it's like, why not? Just ask. It's like, they say no, then, because if you position it as something, and it's something that's a tangible benefit for them, it's a win-win. And so you can do a lot of things there. Another big one has been, going into, this was kind of pre-COVID, but like with someone that works with like mental health services, it's like, go into a company and offer to do like a stress management session once a month or something, and there's just so many little ways.
That would even work during COVID, or just do it on a Zoom call.
Yeah.
Instead of in the office.
And, and the thing is, they're like, well, why would they let me do that? And it's like, sometimes you have to look at like, why would they not? You're offering a free thing for them.
Yeah, if your employees are less stressed, they get sick less often, they get divorced less often. All those things cost companies money.
Yeah, and and it's kind of, some clients have brought up things like, well, what if I don't get any clients from it, like paid clients? And it's like a few hours of your time, for the potential, like
you would have been doing some kind of marketing anyways if you're smart,
right.
And you always are investing in marketing. So like, instead of doing Facebook ads and doing a new Facebook ad campaign, you're doing it local. So it's an investment.
Yeah.
So Tim, I wanted to ask you, like, you've shared so many amazing, good, granular strategies. In closing, I like to sort of bring it up to like, I love thinking about legacy. I come from like multiple generations of men who murdered family members. So it's not a cool family legacy, right? Like I just recently watched that Hillbilly Elegy, and I love the whole, how he honored his mom and helped his mom through the addiction. And he still found a way to pursue his dream and make it happen, and improve things for the family, right? And so I'd love to hear like what when you look forward, like when you think of legacy, it could be your business legacy. I'm very big about creating an intentional legacy, like with my business and in my family. Like, what are some things that you'd like to create? Like you said, we need to bring more innovation and think more creatively about investments. What are some legacy things that you'd like to achieve? Or help facilitate bringing about, improving things?
I think for me, like, I really think that letting, especially in like the smaller towns where it seems like the deck is stacked against someone, just letting people know and showing them, kind of some tangible ways, how, they can be successful as an entrepreneur, or solve problems in their community, or it's something that generally, for any kind of hurdle that you have, there's a solution for it. It's just you may have to look at it a different way, or it may take a little while to find it. But I think I really want people, I guess, like, I don't really care so much about scale anymore and numbers, like, and like net worth and all that. I mean, I used to, but then, you get to the point where it really doesn't matter in terms of your day-to-day life, like, and so I want people,
10 million, 100 million, a 50, a billion. These numbers sound cool, but after a while, it's like your why is shifting, it sounds like.
And it's like, what does that doesn't really do anything for someone, that's like looking at it. It's like, maybe they're inspired a little bit, but it's like, I want to be, people to look back at, and like see that, I showed what's possible, and helped show people tangible ways to actually do things even on a micro scale, that solve a problem or a need and give people the freedom to be an entrepreneur and make a good living, and just know that like you don't have to be build the next Amazon or Google or anything like that. You can make a
Hmm.
huge impact by uh, just doing something small that maybe is uh, something that if you just looked at it from like a very uh, traditional standpoint, it might not be possible. But I
Hmm.
think that that's, especially with COVID, we're all going to have to adapt and just find new creative ways to do things. And so I like being a catalyst of that.
Yeah, that's great, Tim. That's a great way to end our interview. It's like we need to be asking powerful what questions, what innovation, what challenges are there in this industry, what frustrations do I have in these areas, and out of those, you don't have to create a new industry, but you can add some innovation to that
Mhm.
industry and create a lot of great profits.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and especially with the COVID situation, it's like, instead of looking at how do we get things back to where there were, it's like, what what do we do to create new things or move forward with changes
Hmm.
that are better than what we had before. um, because I think with COVID, even there's a lot of, obviously it's affected everybody, and it's there are a lot of negative effects, but I do think that there are some positive effects. Like more people have had to learn to be a little more tech savvy, and
Right.
use, like, working from home is a much more uh, proven out concept. People have been doing it for years, but some are resistant, but now they were forced to, so they know that it works, and
Hmm.
there's just all these little things that come from it. So I think, yeah, it's just like, we just need to look at, like, how do we move forward in a better way.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. Well, Tim, thank you for sharing some of your wisdom with us today. It's been really, I think, enlightening and enjoyable both. I love your alliteration that you have the three B's in your retail store name. Um, that's cool. In closing, what's the best way for people to connect with you? There's so many millions of platforms nowadays. Where's the place you like to interact with people the most?
Yeah, I'm on pretty much any social platform, Timothy Dick, but I would say the best thing for me is probably email, tim at profitlayer.com, or LinkedIn, Timothy Dick LinkedIn, and just look for Profit Layer and VoIPO. Or you can always go to profitlayer.com and voipo.com. And if you do go to one of those websites, you'll probably start seeing my ads at some point. So
You are a good marketer, so you gave people the warning. Don't get
yeah.
upset if you see me in your news feed after you go on our sites. Well, Tim, thank you so much. It's been an extreme pleasure, and yeah, I come from like multiple small towns. The smallest town I lived in was 35,000 people, but my grandmother we used to visit in Arkansas. She lived in a town of 100 people. It was like one stop sign, so two stop signs and one traffic
Yeah.
light. They actually had a traffic light. So sounds like your
Yeah.
town is like maybe 4, 5, 7, 8,000 people, something like this.
Yeah. I mean, depending, there's kind of a cluster, but 1,000 to a few thousand,
Yeah, 1,000 in
depending on.
town and a few thousand with the surrounding area.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very good. Well, we'll go forth and prosper, brother. And everyone watching, like, implement what Tim talked about today. He gave you a lot of important nuggets of ways you can find profit, greater profit in what you're already doing. So thank you so much, Tim.
Absolutely. Thank you.